Welcome to Kingdom Now, the podcast featuring faith with an edge, as we celebrate the kingdom of God within you. I'm your host, Dr. Leanne Marino, apostle, author, and theologian, and founder of Spitfire Apostolic Ministries and all the works that go along with it. I'm excited to share this program with you as we explore the ins and outs of counterculture Christianity present as you live out the kingdom of God in your everyday life. Want to learn more? Visit my website at kingdompowernow.org. And now, our program, which features a variety of formats here just for you. Interviews, teaching and preaching proclaimed everywhere from my North Carolina studio to Sanctuary and beyond. And powerful insights here for now as we turn the world upside down everywhere we go. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, happy whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. And to our listeners in Australia, we say, take it away, Julie.
G'day.
We hope that whatever time of day it is when you are listening, that you are having a good one. And that was kind of fun. Okay. And I welcome you to this edition of the Kingdom Now podcast. And I am your host, Apostle Dr. Leanne Marino, here as the Spitfire, serving as the voice of counterculture Christianity, where we feature the theme of faith with an edge. And if you'd like to learn more about the world of counterculture Christianity, feel free to visit our website at kingdompowernow.org. So, some episodes merit explanation. And this one I'm going to say is actually kind of the second installment of the first one that we did this season called Letting Go of What Lies Behind. And today we're talking about spiritual mold. And yes, that's clickbait, but it's also very reflecting of a lesson that we kind of learned inadvertently. And it also relates to changes of times and seasons, which is a thing that I think is very, very poorly understood within Christianity today. We talk about it a little bit, but we really don't talk about it in a way that makes sense or that we understand. And so, how do spiritual mold and times and season merge? And what does this all have to do with letting go of what lies behind? Well, that's what you're in for to find out, right? So, my guest for this, as you've already heard, with her lovely I almost said South African, with her lovely Australian accent that beats out Southern every time. This is Julie Harvey, who is back again for this episode. And Julie, take a minute and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Julie Harvey, and you just can't keep me away, can you? I just can't.
No,
I just can't stay away.
well, but that's really, really good because,
Yeah.
stuff.
Cleaner, mother, entrepreneur, and all the rest of it.
Ooh, cleaner. That was so much better than there's nothing interesting about me.
But that just rolled off the tongue this morning. It must be all that spiritual mold that I'm getting rid of. Hey, Leanne.
Okay, so do you want to tell everybody how we kind of came up with spiritual mold?
We came up with spiritual mold because really this is part 2 to our letting go of what lies behind episode, which will air soon. And the way we came up with it was we were still cleaning, still going, still clean, still cleaning out the stuff. And, just when we thought that it was over, it's like God's not finished. He's deciding that there's more stuff that you need to get rid of. And it got harder to sort of do it. It was like, well, why do I have to get rid of it? Because, let's face it, you go through your stuff and there's some stuff that you're just like, yeah, I know, I've got to get rid of that. You chuck it away, whatever. But there's other stuff that you sort of, you're clinging to it, and you think, no, what is wrong with this? There's nothing wrong with it. I want to keep it. And it's like, no. And so we had this thing of become moldy, and I was thinking along the lines, we were talking about it, and I was thinking along the lines of the Israelites and how God made them collect the manna, when the manna rained down, and he told them to collect it more on the weekends so they wouldn't have to work on the Sabbath, I guess. And well, I don't know, was the Sabbath around at that time, or was that before the Sabbath?
No, that was the Sabbath. That was part of the Sabbath law.
Yeah, yeah. So it was part of the Sabbath.
They had the manna, they had to collect the manna, and on the day before the manna, they had to collect twice as much.
Yes, yes. So then God spoke to me about more, if you collect too much, if you keep too much stuff, whether it be spiritual, whether it be physical, then it actually becomes moldy. And then you had the example of your Bible, which you're gonna tell.
You're gonna make
You're
me
gonna let
tell
everybody
everybody
know.
that story, huh?
I'm going to make you tell everybody that
So
A Bible story. Get it? It's a Bible story.
so ow, but yeah, okay. So the first revelation that I kind of had, which led up to the Bible story, was that we're really not adequately prepared for the concept of times and seasons, which we can talk about in a little bit. We often think that everything is forever and that we have to take everything with us all the time. And we are
Yep,
not adequately prepared by church for transitional periods and by getting rid of things. It's like, hey, I'm going to take notes at church and we're just going to keep all these notebooks for 4,000 years, and I
yep,
might need them, and we don't consider, hey, maybe I'm not at that church anymore, or maybe, gee, I'm just not where I was back then. And we related that, and then the next day, I have been, as I have talked about on my blog, which is at kingdompowernow.wordpress.com, it's called Kingdom Lessons, as well as I talked about it in the first part where we were talking about letting go of what lies behind. I have tons and tons and tons of books, and the books that I have had have been amassed probably over the past 25 or so years, not counting that we had a lot of books before that. So, you know, my mom had a lot of kids, and when you've got a lot of kids, you've got a lot of books. And even though we had cleared out and given some of those away over the years to different people, or maybe, so that somebody else could have them, we still had a lot of stuff. And the local Salvation Army where I'm from used to give away religious books and Bibles for free. And the reason why that's relevant to the story is because the woman found out what I was doing and found out I had a ministry and found out I was in seminary. And she basically said that we could take whatever we wanted. So, through all those years, even after I left home, my mom took books. And when my mom moved down here and we finally got everything out of storage, we had all these books. And when I moved the first time from my first home in Gastonia to the current one I live in, I did do somewhat of a clean out. I did not do a fantastic job, but I noticed we had duplicates, and I noticed that I had stuff I really didn't need anymore, and I noticed that there was a lot of stuff I just didn't really want to hold on to, and so I did a huge giveaway. But still in this house, there's books everywhere. There are bookshelves on top of each other, which, yes, it's safe to do. Their stackable shelf. I've got those cheap, crappy ones that are fashion furniture from the internet where you put them together with the clapboard. I've got a few of those. I've got ones that are wood and metal. I mean, I've got all sorts of different types of bookshelves to kind of house them all. And I went into ministry all those years ago thinking, gee, I'm going to have all these in order to do my work because I might need one of them at some point in time to defend something or discuss something or handle something. And long story short, I went to clean earlier this year, and I pretty much came to the realization that I did not need every single book I owned to do that. To make a reference in an article. I mean, there was no way I could read all these in my lifetime. And, if I'm going to be referencing for an article or referencing for a book or something like that, I have to have read the book. And I don't need 15 books on the same topic to do that. One or two will do. And I've started cleaning out and I'm cataloging as I go along. There's this wonderful app. It's called librarything.com that lets you scan in the barcodes of your books and you have all the biographical information for referencing and all that. And I was doing this one specific spot in my bedroom on my nightstand. And underneath my nightstand, there's like a little book nook. And I got to this one Bible. Now, Julie, you can testify. And If anybody's watched me on TikTok and seen the videos, you can testify. If I have one Bible, I have a couple hundred Bibles. And I got to this one, and it was this cute little NIV, that's New International Version for those who don't know, that looked kind of like a purse. It was like a pink, like a smoky pink color, and it snapped in the front, and it was real, real cute, personal sized Bible. And the Bible has had mold on it not once but four times. Now, it probably molds because it was kept somewhere that was damp before I ever got it. Because ever since I've had this Bible, and I've had it like 16, 17 years, it always seems to sprout surface mold on it. And some books do, depending on what they're made out of. But it probably got wet before I ever owned it, and I can't get the mold out. Now, I mean, I have treated it for mold, and I've tried to remove the mold at least four times. So I knew as I was standing there that I needed to put it in the giveaway box and give it away. I needed to clean it up, get the mold off of it, and let it go. And God is telling me to give it away, and I standing there and I'm arguing with God. So, and that was a very appropriate time to clear your throat, because I'm standing there arguing with God. And this is the scene, I've got two or three piles of books around me, and I'm standing there like I'm on an episode of Hoarders, arguing about giving away this one thing when there's all this stuff over here. And I said to God, well, maybe I'll take it and I'll use it as my car Bible, my in case of emergency Bible. And the Lord said to me, you have had a King James version of the Bible in the car for over 10 years. When
And you'd forgotten about it, right?
How often have you used that thing? And my answer was never, because I have never had an emergency where I needed the Bible in the car. And now we have things like Bible apps on our phones and, that whole kind of thing. So
Yeah.
the book was cleaned up, the Bible was cleaned all nice and neat, and there's no mold on it now, and it is now in my giveaway box because I think that I got the message about the spiritual mold.
Yeah, so when you were telling me about that, that went mold, we just thought spiritual mold
Spiritual
because we
mold.
thought of the manna
Yes.
and we thought of collecting everything. And the scripture that came to me, like when I started this big clean out of mine, like I'm no stranger to these clean outs. I do them small ones all the time and I'm always getting rid of stuff. But this time it's been a bit different, I think, because God sort of put his finger on and said about storing treasures in heaven where they don't get moth eaten and rusty, And so I'm not sure where that scripture is, but that's what came to me. Because normally I find that when we talk about that scripture, we automatically think, yeah, what are we doing? We can't be materialistic. We can't have anything. I don't know why we do this, but we automatically think it means we can't have anything nice. Have you noticed that?
Oh my God,
we
yes.
can't
I
have
mean,
anything
that's just like,
we
wow.
can't have anything nice on earth because we're going to heaven and we don't need to have anything nice here, and so we can just walk around we can have a poverty mindset and just wear rags all the time because hey, we can't store up treasures on earth or we can't have anything. But that I don't think that's what it means. What I think it means is excess.
Hmm.
He's talking about excess. He's talking about Leanne standing in her room with all of these Bibles around her.
Moo. Okay, I mean, when I'm guilty, I'm guilty.
So, yeah. So that's basically, what we've been talking about. And it's
Mhm,
quite interesting to think that, we're both on opposite sides of the globe, and yet
mhm,
God is saying basically the same thing
mhm.
to us. I mean, yeah, we know that He knew we'd get together and start joking about it and all the rest of it.
He
And
did.
that's sort of what and because so we thought after the last podcast that we did, it was basically the same subject where we thought we've got to go a bit deeper with this,
Mhm.
because Christians are really bad at this.
Yeah.
They're bad at this. Like I said, when they think about scriptures like that, like the manna and that automatically means we've got to go over the top spiritual and no, we can't have anything nice, and we can't do this and we can't do that, because we automatically become, I don't know what it is, but we get legal with everything, don't we? We
Yeah.
fall into the trap of legalism every time, but that's not really what it's saying.
Mhm.
What it's saying is you've got to get rid of some of this stuff. It's holding you back. It's moldy, like me and all my box of stuff that I got rid of. And last week, because I think when we did the podcast, I was still in the process of doing it, and I hadn't finished it. And what I've got a tendency to do is get 3/4 of the way through something, pat myself on the back.
Mhm.
"Oh, you've done a really good job," and I'll just leave the rest of it in there for another 3 years or something like that.
Mhm.
But this time, I had to open that box for something, and I went, "Oh, 3 weeks ago, I cleaned this box out. Oh, I still didn't," because what I thought, and it was true, I had to wait for the garbage man to come empty the bin, because the bin couldn't fit no more in it once I did that big cleanup.
Mhm.
But the problem was, I sort of thought, "Oh, that's okay, I'll leave it till later." But normally that later would be 3 years.
Right.
But this time it was 3 weeks, and God was on my case again.
Mhm.
And I went, "Really? Can't I just leave it?" And I thought, "No, I've gotta get it done," you know?
Mhm.
So I got that whole box done for once in my
Mhm.
life. And the funny thing is, since we started, I don't know about you, Leanne, but since we started doing this deep clean this time, I have actually found circumstances in my life have been starting to change in correlation with getting rid of that old spiritual stuff, getting rid of those old spiritual writings. And
Mhm.
I found that it was almost like God was starting to move in areas that I hadn't seen him move for years. And I think, wow, and I'd think, wow. And so 2 or 3 things would happen really quickly. And I'm like, oh my God, you sort of freak out a bit. Because when you go a long time
Mhm.
with nothing happening in God, and I've been through basically seasons like that where,
Mhm.
and I suppose I got used to that. I must have gotten comfortable with, oh, you get this pipe, you feel like you've got this pipe dream, and you feel like you've got this thing that, and you just go along and think, yeah, well, that'll be another 5 or 6, maybe even another decade before I see anything happening. But I'm getting older now, and so if these promises from God are gonna come true, it's not gonna really be that much longer.
Mhm.
And so here's me still stuck in that old mindset of, oh, this will take another few years to, but it seemed like things speeded up
Mhm.
really quick, and things started happening, and I couldn't cope. And God said, "See, because it, this cleaning out, it has a spiritual connotation, because you're letting go of this stuff and you're becoming more free, and it's like God has got more room to work, sort of
Mhm.
thing."
Yeah, that makes
It
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what's been happening with me.
Mhm.
And yeah.
I hadn't thought a lot about it till you just mentioned it. And I think that in my instance, and I can speak from this side of the world, and a lot of it based on knowing me, and even a lot of it's been on the podcast, that I think that, like you say, it's very, very difficult sometimes to find the place of moderation. I believe that the Bible encourages us to be moderate in things, and we like our extremes. As
Yeah.
we talk about in things, we like our binaries. We like from swinging from one part to the other. And as a person, to be honest, I actually kind of like cleaning. I like the cleaning itself. It does not bother me. It's got this weird catharsis. It's probably got something to do with my compulsivity. I really like the feeling of clean, and I don't mind the process of doing it. But sorting and taking the time to go through stuff is not my favorite activity. And I'll stand there and scrub the tub all day, or I'll be thrilled to, put away laundry or vacuum or feel the clean from those kind of activities. But having to take the time and say, you know what, I have enough books, I'm not buying any more. Nobody buy me a book for Christmas. which I've done. To go downstairs, I love plants, but between my mom and I, there are too many in this house for the winter now. Do not buy me a plant. To really kind of set those limits and say, I need to go through what I've got here. And then to
Yeah.
actually take the time to do it. Like you say, I've been saying, oh, I'm going to catalog my books and go through my books for almost 5 years. And I have literally just started doing it in the past month or so. Before that was kind of going through books and maybe, here and there on occasion giving one away. But I said, no, this has to be a really deliberate effort. And along with that, I have a book that I've been working on for 6 months that's actually a revision. And for those of you who know about me and writing, revisions are not my favorite thing to do. They are not my favorite activity simply because it's like you're rewriting a book, and much like we're talking about, you are in a totally different place than when you wrote it, which
Yeah.
is why
Yep.
it needs to be revised. But that often means, in my case, I'm like rewriting the whole thing. And this week, as I'm sitting here, I finally hit chapter 20, which is the final chapter. Now, I don't believe I would have been able to sit down this week and actually have the discipline to finish this book if I was not doing the other cleaning. And the reason for that is because as we are cleaning, there is a certain level of spiritual growth and process that goes along with it. And I think that that's the part that's really important to us. And I think the part that's really making a big difference is that as we are cleaning, we are making room for new things. We are making room for new
Yeah.
ideas. We are making room for new focus and for new discipline. And even though, to somebody listening, it may not make sense, they may be going, okay, what does you cleaning up your books and getting rid of stuff and getting rid of a Bible that you're not even using? What does that have to do with you having new inspiration and new ideas and wanting to move on to new things? Well, it's everything, because all these things that we're letting go of, we've been holding on to, and they represent other things that are in our way spiritually.
That's right. They symbolize like God, and God used a lot of symbols in the Old Testament, a
Hmm.
lot of symbols to portray different things that were happening or were going to
Hmm.
happen and all the rest of it. So, very much so, they actually take up space. They take up space spiritually, whether we believe that or not, they actually do. So, and what I've found, I'll probably have to make a bit of a confession in order to say this, but and this is actually the truth. What God has been doing with me probably over the last 10 years is I've become like a cleaner. I would always have factory jobs, and I worked at GMH Holden and GM Holden and all the rest of it, like, for years, and I worked in factory settings, and I did courses to become in business management and to do business admin and things like that. And so I'm a writer. I can write and I can blog and
Hmm.
I can do all of that sort of thing. And so what God did to me was, I I've got to be honest here. I'm not a very good well, I wasn't a very good cleaner, and I wasn't very good at keeping my house clean. I'm the opposite to you, Leanne. I quite like going through things and culling them and getting rid of things, like going through stuff and getting rid of it. But when it came to the actual cleaning, like vacuuming and mopping and cleaning the bathroom, I'm a bit slack. I would go a month before I would vacuum. And
Hmm.
the we haven't got carpet. We've got rugs, and we've got like not floorboards but floating floors. So,
Hmm.
and the rug would just get dirtier and dirtier. And I've got to be honest, I'm a bit of a dirty person when it comes to. But what God did to me to discipline me, because He knew I would never move unless He did something, was I couldn't find work. And so I started working for a friend that was a cleaner, and that was in 2010. before I got pregnant with my daughter.
Mhm.
And so I started my cleaning career, if you'd like to call it that. And since then, I have, like, I didn't work for a couple of years when I had my daughter, and so I had to give it up, like, after I was trained, basically, a couple of years. But then I went back to work cleaning for my friend once again, once Kayla was a toddler and I could get a babysitter for her. So since then, that was 2014, so it's nearly 10 years
Mhm.
now. And so that's how God tackled my laziness, by making me do something I hated, cleaning. And so
Mhm.
that became my job. So that was like a discipline. So this whole thing's been a discipline for me. And even recently in the last, so I was cleaning a school. I've been cleaning schools and kindies for years, but last year we had COVID cleaning, which I was doing during the day as well as my cleaning job at night.
Mhm.
And I've probably mentioned that in the podcast before, that I needed a job because we lost the COVID cleaning. And so I lost $300 a fortnight or whatever it was, or it might even been a week. I can't remember now. But I lost a fair amount of money when that job went, because the government axed the funding. And so what I had to do was find another job, and find another job fairly quick, because, we couldn't afford that drop in income, because as we know, once we start earning that amount, we get more comfortable. And so
Mhm.
during that time, we bought another car. Well, we got another car on HP. So now we have a car payment that we didn't have before, and things like that. So I really needed another job. So what happened was I ended up getting another job house cleaning. And so then the discipline, it was even like becoming more intense. As well as that, I had to go to people's houses. It was like customer service as well, because you were cleaning someone's home. And so I was doing that for 18 months, and I won't go into it all here, but suffice to say, I've got other things in mind now. And so I quit that job. But during that 18 months, I learnt even more intensively how to clean,
Mhm.
even like deeper, like how to do deep cleaning, and how to, and what chemicals to use, and just the discipline of doing it,
Mhm.
like cleaning a shower and cleaning a bath and cleaning for someone else, where you had to make sure the job was done properly. And
Right.
so all of this stuff has caused me to become, because there's nothing worse than cleaning for someone all day and then going to your other job at night and cleaning a school, all houses and schools all day, and then coming home to your own house and your own house. I mean, I'm not saying my house gets dirty, because I've got a husband and a daughter too.
Mhm.
And my daughter, I'm going to be honest, she does not clean up after herself. She leaves a mess. I could get this house spotless, and I could come home from work and the table, it would just be a mess. But God was trying to teach me. He was trying to get the laziness out of me. I can see that now. Like, and so now I'm in this thing of, I look at my house and it just annoys me. I can see the things I haven't done. But I've come such a long way
Mhm.
from 10 years ago. And so God is he's a practical God as well as a spiritual God. But in saying that, the practical side of it, as you were saying, Leanne, ties in so much more with the spiritual than what we think it does.
Mhm.
Because just getting rid of this old paperwork, this old stuff, cleaning little areas out that you haven't cleaned for a while, like behind your TV, for instance, I've still got to do that. It's dusty.
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you, it's really bad at the moment. So I've still got things like that I need to do. But I've become more disciplined, you know. Yeah, my house is 100% better than what it was. Even though, saying that, I suppose the house itself is becoming run down in other ways, because the lino needs replacing. But
Mhm.
they're things that I can't do. But God's not focusing on that at the moment.
Right.
So, but in the midst of all of that, He is teaching me spiritual lessons, coincide with. So what I had to do was step out and give up my job in belief that another job was coming, which I've had to do that before.
Mhm.
But this time, the financial side of it has been a little bit tighter when I've done it. Well, I suppose I've done tight situations before. But I don't know, I've got more peace than what I had last time, like a lot more, because I'm learning to trust God more that He will provide. But at the same time, it's this, you don't need that. And you look at some things and you think, but why not? Why can't I keep it? Like, why can't I keep that little Bible? Why can't I, what's wrong with that little Bible? It's
Mhm.
just sitting, a little Bible, and God is saying, "No, it belongs to someone else now." Maybe it's
Mhm.
someone else's blessing.
Right.
You're holding on to someone else's blessing, and yeah. So, and He wants to give you new blessings. He wants
Mhm.
to give you new stuff. Like with my book, let's go back to some of the more spiritual side of it. As you know, Leanne, we've been talking about my book, Big
Mhm.
Valley, and how it's not in, what did you say? Maybe you could share a little bit, because I'm not sure what's the speak, to do with publishing and things like that. It's not listed anymore. Is that right?
Your contract was up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, that's right.
your contract was up,
My
and
co-
your publisher no longer exists, and your book has been
right.
published, and now it's time for you to start to think about what you wanna do with it.
Right. So now this, back to the book. The book, I've been aware for a little while that I need to take a look at it.
Mhm.
And so what we talked about, Leanne, was basically the fact that, and you were saying the same thing about your books. You basically, and I know I've got to just pull it apart, and I've changed so much since 2012.
Right.
Like, that's 11 years ago, and it's like mostly whatever, and I'm gonna give the book a new title. It won't even be the same animal, but some of the content in the book I need, but I basically need to strip it back to nothing and start again, in a sense, like you've said you've had to do
Mhm.
with a lot of your books. And do you know what I mean? In order to do that, I had to let go of my idea of my own book, if that makes sense. It's a little bit hard to
Well, no,
explain,
I
but
think it's exactly what we're talking about, and what I will jump
yeah,
in with is that, first of all, I believe fundamentally that spirituality is practical, and I think that we find spirituality in practical things. The world that we live in, particularly like I remember when I was coming up, if you wanted to be spiritual, you had to do big things. And that was true whether we were Christian or not Christian. So if you were not Christian, you went to India and Tibet and sat in the lotus position for 20 hours and meditated on nothing. If you were Christian, we had to go to heaven 40 times a day. And we had to have all these signs and wonders and miracles. And we were always really drawn to the big, the big, the big, the big, the big, the overdone. And one of the
yeah,
things that I feel that we have as Christians faltered with is that in this pursuit of big, we are forgetting about the fact that little things matter. I think it's in the Song of Solomon, there's the statement that the little foxes spoil the vine. That means
yeah,
that the little things that we do can determine our success or our failure. And it means, in essence, that little things do matter, that we do need to pay attention to those things. We don't always need to be looking for a big thing. And I understand that maybe cleaning out your house, or the idea of God telling you to go clean out your house or go wash your dishes, is not necessarily the most exciting spiritual premise. Me going through the books is kind of the opposite because it's a big project. That's why I kept putting it off for 3 years and 4 years and 5 years. I always basically kind of said, well, I'll get to it when I get to it, kind of thing. And
yeah,
there always seemed to be something bigger, or revising my books. I would love to just write a ton of books on new revelation. And I have made the statement that when I am finished with this one for a little while, I need a break from revisions. There's one book that's not going to be a huge revision that I might tinker with a little bit, but I am going to work on a different type of project because the revision is so much work. And no, it's not fun to go back over your own stuff that you already wrote. It's not fun to go over it. And I'm even going to say critically, and I don't mean that we're judging ourselves, but we're honestly analyzing that we're not where we used to be. And that maybe what we said, it's not that we're liars or that we're hypocrites, it's that we're evolving people, that we are growing spiritually, and our lives and our perspectives change where we're at. So,
And times have
and
changed.
times have
You know,
changed.
your audience has changed. Younger people
Mhm.
need different messages
Like you
than what
talked about with
we've got.
Kayla in the first
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
I should have specified that in the first episode about the
Yeah. I
things that
I know what you meant.
you learned with in the 70s are not going to work with Kayla now.
That's right. Yeah.
And we understand
Yeah.
that in that literal sense, but we don't understand it spiritually. Isn't it even all the more that the more God tells us to move on, the more God says, you're not in that season anymore. You get these people, they just dig their heels in even more. Well, it was good enough for our forefathers and it was good enough for our ancestors and it worked for them. Dude, it ain't working for you now.
That's right. That's exactly right. Like even with for me, I've got this big thing at the moment with I came to terms a couple of weeks ago with my own death.
Hmm.
That sounds horrible. It sounds a bit daunting and a bit scary, but it no, actually it was quite peaceful because I had to contemplate it, because I had a death in the family like a couple of years ago and it shook me a little bit,
Hmm.
because they were a close family member and I was there when they passed and all the rest of it. And it was a very confronting thing.
Hmm.
But I mean, I knew God was with that person. I knew there were angels there. I felt their presence. I felt the presence of Jesus there as well when they passed away. I didn't say anything at the time. I didn't feel led to, but
Hmm.
that was about coming on for 3 years ago. But since that time, I had to sort of seriously think about my own life and how long I've got left. I'm 54 years old. When we get over 50, you'd start having those thoughts. You
Hmm.
start thinking more seriously about your legacy, what you're going to leave behind, what you're going to, all that sort of stuff. How you want to leave your family, like, because my daughter, like, I had my daughter when I was 41, and so she's a lot. There's a bigger gap between
Hmm.
me and her than what maybe there would be for a younger parent, like, and the chances of me being alive when she's 40 are lower than what they would be for a younger parent,
Hmm.
obviously. So I found myself having to think about all this stuff, and it took me nearly 3 years or 2.5 years, but I finally made peace with that. I made peace with, well, yeah, you're not going to be here forever, and that was what I was struggling with. I'm not going to be here forever, and all the rest of it. So I made peace with that, and so it's sort of all been tying in with things that are happening now, and
Hmm.
I won't go into that, but it's just made for very interesting times and seasons for me because I feel like you do, Leanne, that you've crossed over into a completely different season. I mean, I found myself on Saturday morning
Hmm.
and Saturday thinking I'm in a completely different place. And you know how sometimes when you're thinking about things and you're mulling over things, you can sort of find comfort in certain times in your life and certain things that are
Hmm.
happening. But I found that I couldn't do that. Like, it was almost like I'd been taken out of that realm and plopped down in a completely different place.
Hmm.
And I didn't recognize anything spiritually speaking. If I were to hear with my spiritual ears and look with my spiritual eyes, it was not that the things were bad. It was just that I didn't recognize anything.
Hmm.
And it's not a bad thing. It's in fact a good thing because I'm in a new place.
Right.
So it's just something that I've just found so interesting, and it's all happened all around the same time of me cleaning out to a deeper degree. And so when God asks you to start cleaning out your cupboards,
Mhm.
don't ever think that it's just something that's going to be boring, because you might find that he might take you on a wild ride
Yeah.
at the same time.
Wow.
And you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Because I can honestly say I'm a little bit freaked out
Mhm.
about some of the things that are happening at the moment. Not all of them are good,
Mhm.
because we've also had some more bad, serious news in the family, and that's not good either. But I said to you the other day, Leanne, it's no coincidence that I've come to terms with my own mortality.
Mhm.
I think that's how I put it to you. I had to come to terms with that before I could help anybody else.
Mhm.
And that is so relevant. Why do we think that, oh, I'll just go out there and I'll preach? So it's become a real big thing ever since we did that podcast 4 years ago.
Mhm.
Like you were saying, one of your favorite podcasts,
Say hello to heaven.
the evangelism. Yeah, the evangelism side of things, it's not always about opening your mouth. It's not always about bashing people over the head with a Bible. It's being there for people
Mhm.
when they're going through a hard time. You don't always have to preach to them. It's something we hear in the churches,
Mhm.
but people still do it. They still feel the need to go on Facebook. I mean, I see it in my feed every day.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not saying it's all bad, but I'm just saying that some people go overboard
Mhm.
with the spiritual side of things. And I think I looked at one person's post the other day and I thought, you know what? You're not winning anybody with that stuff. I'm
Mhm.
sorry. Maybe 50 years ago, but it's just not going to, I'm going to say this. I hate putting it this way. Get somebody saved. Isn't that what church used to be all
Yeah,
about?
right.
I've got to get somebody saved.
Mhm.
I've got to get somebody saved. When I first became a Christian, I was literally under condemnation almost 24/7, because now that I'm saved, I've got to get somebody, quote unquote, saved.
Mhm.
And I felt bad because I'm not really that sort of person that will go up to someone and say, do you know Jesus? I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place for that. But what I'm saying is, these days, people are not going to listen. I mean, I know from a preacher, you could say, well, if they don't listen, then that's not my responsibility. That's their problem. And I
Mhm.
think, well, so if you're saying that, do you really care about that person then? Do you really?
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? You're not taking their feelings into consideration at all. But they're supposed to, when you're preaching Christ and an atheist comes back at you and starts swearing and carrying on at you know, and that because you've stirred them up and they're angry, and you're thinking, well, serve them right. But hang on a minute. Why does it have to be like that all the time? Why do we get this idea that we have to be obnoxious if they don't
Right.
listen to us?
Mhm.
Like, is it helping? I always ask myself, is it going to help their salvation by me opening my mouth? And the majority of the time at the moment, it's
It's
no.
not. Yep.
It's no. And I know preachers don't like to hear this. This is not a very preachy
Well,
message
this isn't a
from
very
me.
preachy
But
program, Julie.
no, it's not. That's why we're on here, isn't
Yeah.
it? Sort of thing. But I just think, will you? I think it, and I think, will you shut up?
Mhm.
So if I'm thinking that, then what are the non-Christians thinking? And it is not getting them saved. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
it's not.
Right.
In fact, it's pushing them away even further.
Mhm.
It's not going to bring them to God. It's going to repel them.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll draw all men unto me. So if you're not drawing them and you're repelling them instead because you've got attitude, because, well, they're just a sinner, they're just da 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 da. Hang on a minute. Think back to when you were, because most of these people that are doing this, their past is just like,
Mhm.
oh, but I'm saved and I'm washed by the blood of the Lamb. But that does not give you right to be obnoxious to people.
Mhm.
Jesus, he knew just how to push people's buttons, but, well, in the right
Well, and he
way.
also knew
And
whose
I
buttons to
always
push.
I always go back to the fact that whenever he got angry, it was always with the religious people of his time. It was never with the
Mhm,
sinners. I'm sorry, but it wasn't with the sinners. It was always with the religious people
mhm.
that he got mad at. I mean, if that doesn't tell us something, then you know what I
Right.
mean. If that
Well,
doesn't,
because
yeah.
Jesus knew who to talk to and when, and that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'm also going to say that Jesus recognized times and seasons. Now, for those who don't know our lingo, basically, time is time, and so it is basically kind of the times in which we're in. And seasons are the spiritual shifts that are within that time. So, we're basically talking about understanding what's going on in our times from a spiritual perspective. And things are not done the way they used to be. They just are not. And like you're pointing out, the church is not dealing well with it. I think that we're really, really not. I mean, I think about what you're talking about when we first both got saved. It took me a little while to get to the 24-hour condemnation. I didn't have it at first. But the more I got in and the more serious I wanted to get in my faith and the more, I guess we could say, legalistic groups I got into, the more we got there. And it did happen. I did get there. Around the time that we met, it's like I've said, all we had to do was have two bad thoughts in a row and we were condemned for the rest of the day. We were done. We were out. We were
That's
done. And,
right.
it really did not take very much for us to tend to feel that way. And I think that what you said is kind of interesting. And I'm wondering about it in terms of seasons and shifts because I actually did not tell you this and you did not know this. I had two encounters with atheists this week. Now, you have
Oh.
to remember, I've been here working on a book all week. And what I have been doing is I joined a couple of different sites for podcast swaps, which is basically where I'll be a guest on yours if you'll be a guest on mine kind of deal. And to find different forums to be a guest on different podcasts because that way it also helps their listening audience as well as our own because it kind of builds up ours while building up theirs. So going on different podcasts kind of benefits everybody. And it is a different experience to be a guest versus being the host all the time, which is what I have been for the past, 5 seasons. And I first had a request to do a pod swap. And the woman who requested the pod swap, I'm going to say, did not look up my podcast in advance, which is a bit of a rookie mistake, as we would say. You should not be offering or wanting to do that and not know what the show is about. And I had an entire show info on my page and I did all this whole thing. And when I was asked what we would discuss on the pod swap, my thing was because I was going on the premise that she had looked me up or she had at least kind of checked out, what I was about, because I did do that with her, was I figured she knew we were a faith-based program. And I said, maybe you could talk about what your expertise is in from a faith perspective and how faith can kind of benefit it. And what I got in return was a very long-winded story about being an atheist and how she didn't know if she was an appropriate guest on my podcast. And my
Oh.
response to her was that, what your field is in does affect people faith or not. And if we could kind of work out some type of a compromise, I don't have a problem with that. We don't have to talk about that angle of it, but if that's the case, then you have to kind of tell me what you want to talk about and what you're comfortable with. And I said that, I don't want to have a debate. I turned down being on a podcast with a guy who was an atheist because that's what he wanted to do. And I said to her, if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. And the other incident, and I have not heard back from her because I did also make the point of saying, I can't really talk about my story without talking about my faith because it's intertwined. So if that's a problem, we can scrap the whole thing. But I was also promoting Sanctuary's doing Friendsgiving this year. And for those who don't know what Friendsgiving is, it's basically kind of a counter tradition for our Thanksgiving Day by which instead of maybe going to be with family, you can start something with your friends. And you don't necessarily do it on Thanksgiving Day like we do it on the nearest Sunday before or after. But we're starting to do this, and I put up a flyer about it, and I put up an announcement for it on a queer social network. The social network is called Lex. I don't know if they have it in Australia or not. And I had somebody contact me about that. Now, nobody ever contacts me on that site. We always put up our events. That's the only reason why I'm there. And nobody ever messages me on that site. And I got a message from someone who's a satanic atheist, as she put it. And she, said it's really hard reaching out. It's really hard to talk to people in this area. But she didn't know if that being word church was a problem. And I said to her, we kind of go on the premise, if you don't have a problem with us, we don't have one with you. And yeah, if if it's a turnoff, we are going to talk about spiritual things. We are a church, but we welcome
Yeah,
questions.
that's right.
We're not gonna stop being us. But if you have questions or you want to have a conversation, we are always open to that. And I made a point of saying I also have a degree in religion, and I do know about atheism, and I do know about Satanism, and I do know about atheistic Satanism. And so nobody is going to think that you're murdering cats on the full moon. And she laughed, and I said, if you want to come, you're absolutely welcome. We don't have any problem with it. And she said, well, I definitely will remember that and think about that, and maybe come for something. So, like you're saying, it's not a traditional narrative. I didn't ask anybody about their
Yeah.
salvation because, to be quite honest, I mean, and I'm going to speak very honestly here now. I don't have a great history talking to atheists. Not because I'm mean or because of me, but because I don't care and I don't want to talk about this anymore, and they always seem to want to. And I've
Yeah,
had
yeah.
incidents with people where they're very downright argumentative, and that's like with the podcast host. I don't want to have an argument, okay? If I can talk about my faith from my own experience with what happened, then that's fine. If it's going to be a problem, then let me know now because I don't want to sit and have a debate about it. If that's where
Yeah,
you're
that's
fine, I'm
right.
not going to bother you, but it's not going to change.
Don't try and convince
Right,
me, that it's not real.
right,
Just like you don't want me to convince you that it is real,
right.
don't do the opposite. Don't do it to me. Don't
Exactly.
try and tell me
You
that
know,
it's not
if
real.
this
It's
is
the same
it is the
thing. It's
same thing.
respect.
I don't have a problem with you if you don't have a problem with me. And I've had a long history where they tend to always have a problem with that. They don't like that because there's no open door. Now,
They do more preaching.
right.
They actually do more preaching sometimes than the preacher
Now,
does.
this is not to say every atheist in the world is like that. I'm just saying this has been my
No. Oh,
experience.
no.
And so I'm upfront. I want to have a debate with you. If we can talk and, it's all right for me to talk about my experience, then that's fine. If not, then we'll scrap it. But it was not a traditional narrative that I had with them. And I truly do believe that it's not an accident that twice in 1 week, as I'm working on giving all this stuff away, that this happened. And I believe that it's because of what you're talking about. That I hate to say this, but in a lot of ways, there's a lot of churches and a lot of Christians that are moldy. They're holding on,
It's
and
true.
I'm right about that. I mean, they're holding on to the Bible interpretation, I'm going to say, that was old, that nobody wants to
Yeah.
hear anymore,
Yeah.
that we've even proven or debunked or said, look, you took it out of context. And I think Jesus knew how to talk to people in his day. I mean, do we really assume that, yes, Jesus went into ministry for 3 years before he died, but that he never talked to anybody about anything before that? And he probably talked to people differently. I'm sure that the way he talked in the temple when he was 12 was different than the way he talked to the woman caught in adultery when he was however old he was when that happened, and so on and so forth. And we have to be able to recognize from our practical signs what's going on in the spiritual realm so we can respond in a way that's going to be heard.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And too many Christians are holding on to old ideas and traditions and things like that are, like you say, they're outdated. And there's that saying, comes back to me, Ichabod.
Hmm.
Ichabod, the glory has departed. It's not there anymore. God's not resting on that anymore. The fire by night and the cloud, God moved them. He
Mhm,
moved them around all the time. And I'm sure that was an example of what our faith is meant to be like. We're supposed to
mhm,
move, keep moving, you know?
right.
So, yeah,
Yep. We're
exactly.
supposed to keep moving
Mm,
even if it's the long way because, everybody criticizes the Israelites and that they grumbled and they complained and it took 40 years because of that. But if you read the Bible, the cloud and the pillar led them. So God led them the
yeah.
long way. God led them that way for 40 years because of their issues. And he was giving them,
Yeah,
yeah,
it said about them seeing war. He didn't want them to see war. They weren't
right.
ready.
They weren't ready.
They were not
They were
ready.
not ready. And, we can judge them. But the reality is, there are some of us in the church that have been wandering around the same damn mountain for way longer than 40 years. So,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, I know.
like you say, spiritual mold. I mean, that they are very much dwelling in that. And I mean, I guess what I'm going to say is that I think people don't do it because this is hard and it's freeing and there's a liberation in it, but it takes your time. It means that
That's
you
right.
you
Like God
attend to stuff.
well, God taught me, like I was saying before, how to clean through making me clean through work, through employment. I wanted an office job.
Mhm.
God gave me a cleaning job. And now, in hindsight, I love it. Not because I love, well, it's not really my favorite, like I was saying, but it has pushed me. I told you the season I was in when I started for the cleaning company in May and then I finished up last week.
Mhm.
God pushed me out of my comfort zone to the point that it was driving me crazy. But I'm so much stronger because of it. And I can testify because and I know God is laughing at this because this morning before we came on here and started this podcast, guess what I was doing?
You were clean.
My vacuuming,
Mhm.
my washing, my tidying of my house. And I said to you, hang on a minute, I've just got to hang the washing out before I came on. Not that I don't. That's another thing that I've always been pretty good with,
Mhm.
with my washing, but
Mhm.
I just don't want everybody to think that I'm a dirty pig. No.
Look, I've seen pictures of your house. You're not a dirty pig. I mean, some people are just not into cleaning like others. I mean, you also have to consider, as we're talking about the cleaning thing, I don't have any biological kids.
But I've become what's the word for it? I have been transformed. God's been transforming me. I'm still a work in progress, obviously, but I've become someone that now almost if I see a mess, I can't stand it. So I've got to do something about it. I mean, my kitchen's got dishes everywhere at the moment. I didn't get to
Uh-huh.
that. I vacuumed before I but the point is I'm improving.
Right.
I'm getting better. I'm still not there by any means. Like I'm looking at dust now and on my computer desk, like a bit of paperwork is a bit messy, but I've come such a long way that I can testify I'm a work in progress still, but I'm getting better,
Yes.
you
And
know.
that's the point, is that
So
from season to season we get better. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. It's like we said, in every single season, in order to prepare for what's next, something lets go of something. So in the spring, seeds let go of their casings. And in the summer, they grow out of them and they form roots. And you have the buds open up and you've got the flowers in there. So the flowers get rid of the buds and the leaves, buds, they get rid of it. And then you go into the fall and everything loses its leaves or its flowers. And then in the wintertime, everything kind of rests and sleeps and we give up our daylight. So everything in each season gives something up so that we can move to something next.
and it's not a coincidence that people in the southern hemisphere I mean, obviously it's science as well. Don't get me wrong, I'm not discrediting science. Otherwise there'll be someone listening to this thinking, hang on a minute, it's science. You're on the other, like it's to do with the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. Yes, I know that, but God's done it for a reason. While you're in winter, I'm in
Right.
summer. People have different seasons.
Yes.
And, we've got to also be discerning and compassionate and sometimes keep our mouths shut because someone is in a different season to us.
Mhm.
Sometimes even our successes, I find some people, I mean, yes, we can be happy for someone else, but when they're constantly, oh, look at, I mean, I suppose maybe I do it a little bit. Maybe people get annoyed with me and my pictures of my flowers and my roses and think, will she stop? I'm sick of it. Look at my barren wasteland of a yard.
I
But
like your flowers anyway.
but you know what I'm trying to say. Like there is a time that does come that we need. Sometimes we just need to shut up about our success because someone's hurting.
Mhm.
You know, we need to be discerning that no, I'm not saying that, oh, we have to be quiet all the time just because someone's being a pain in the butt and they're being a whinger and they're complaining. I mean, you're always going to get that, but we've just got to be sensitive sometimes. Oh, no, I don't need to say that to that person. They're having a hard time at the
Mhm.
moment. They don't want to hear about my success. They don't want to hear about, you just got to know how to talk to people and be just a little bit more sensitive.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, they don't need to hear that. For instance, they don't need to hear about my wonderful marriage.
Mhm.
They've just gone through a
Right.
divorce. I'm just pulling stuff out of the air. But some people, but you know what? There are people out there that they just enjoy rubbing people's nose in it.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Some people say, "Oh, they don't really mean that," and I can see right through some people. And I think, yes, they do.
Mhm.
But that's a whole nother subject. But we've just got to be sensitive to other people. They're in other seasons than us. Sometimes we need to just be quiet.
Mhm.
Like you say, sometimes the Holy Spirit will just tell you to just shut up.
Yes.
Just shut up.
Mhm. Just be
You
quiet for a
know.
season.
Yeah, yeah, like a whole maybe you can keep your mouth shut for a month. Nah, I'm joking. I'd never last that long. Oh my god, keep my mouth shut for a month. Yeah, right.
No, he'd give you
Yeah.
something.
You give me something to say.
Anyway, we're
Yeah.
pretty much at the end of our episode. So, what is something that you would like to say in closing to leave with our audience?
Just be aware that, like I said before, when you're cleaning out things, God is usually when there's something practical going on, he likes to give you lessons through that.
Mhm.
Like I suppose the parables were like
Yes.
that. Jesus gave parables about certain things. He told stories about things that people could relate to. And I guess when we're doing our dishes or when we're vacuuming, God might point something out and you'll think, yeah, oh yeah. And so he'll give you a spiritual
Mhm.
story along to go. And I think that's exciting. So I mean, it might take a while to come. Like I said, I felt severely disciplined for a little while when I had to clean shower alcoves and do exit cleans and things like that. And it pushed me physically as well. But I've learnt so much from it. It was worth
Mm.
it. It's always worth it. It's God will always make it worth it in the end.
Mhm.
There's always another lesson to learn from it. Even in the little things that we think, "Oh, yeah, how boring."
Right.
So that's it, really. That's my last little bit to put to it.
Well, no, that makes perfect sense. In other words, find God even in the stuff you don't want to do. Don't let your stuff get moldy.
Oh, yeah.
So, how can everybody get in contact with you if they would like to?
Well, it's really Facebook is an easy way of getting in touch with me. I've got my profile, Julie Harvey, but I've also got my page, Encouragement for Today, where I just post things that I think might be an inspiration to people. If something jumps out at me, I'll post it.
Mhm.
Even if it's flowers or a cabin in the Swiss Alps, I will post it because if it makes me feel better in my everyday surroundings, if I think, gee, just a nice picture sometimes of the
Mhm.
mountains make you feel good. It doesn't always need to be like a little blurb to go along with it, like a
Mhm.
meme, but sometimes pictures can help. So that's what I like to post on my website. Just if you're feeling like your spirits need to be lifted a little bit, then you can find me on Encouragement for Today. So, yeah, there's a couple of pages, I think, with Encouragement for Today. Mine's got about 7,000 people following or whatever. I mean, not that I'm trying to discourage you from following anything that's encouraging, but
But
yeah.
yours is best. Anyway,
And yeah, and I'm on Discord as well, like with you guys, Sanctuary. I am on
yes.
there, even though I still finding it difficult to navigate it a little bit, but oh well.
It gets easier. And so that is our Discord group that you are mentioning. There is a Sanctuary Discord.
Yep.
And you can access the Sanctuary Discord if you are interested through the Sanctuary website at welcomeinthisplace.org. And we will be more than happy to add you. So we'd love to have you on there. Well, I thank you for being on this episode of the program. And, in a few days from now, we'll plot and we'll come up with another podcast to do. So you'll be back. We already know that you were a couple seasons back rated the favorite guest anyway. So we absolutely
Yeah, well, look at this. I'm bearing my soul. I'm telling everybody how much of a dirty house I've got, you know.
well, you're making sure nobody feels
So
condemned. So there you go.
I'm not a very good cleaner, really. I mean, well, like I said, I don't, God, what does He do? He gives me the career of
Mhm.
cleaning to do. I mean, God's got such a wicked sense of. I shouldn't use the word wicked, maybe. He's got such a. Oh, he's got such a good sense of humor, like, yeah,
Yes.
wicked sense of humor. No, no.
He's got a sense of humor. We're going to say that.
No.
And it's never funny when it's about us. It's always funny as hell when it's about someone else, isn't it? But never when it's about us.
But it is funny when we look
It
back.
is.
It's
It
hilarious
is.
when we look back. I mean, you're gonna look back 5 years from now and laugh at yourself standing in the middle of the room with that
Oh, I'm
Bible,
doing it
and
now.
I'm never gonna forget
Oh, I'm
that
doing it now.
because I can picture you doing it. I can see you doing it. I'm thinking, "Oh
With my
my goodness."
AC/DC shirt on, nonetheless. I'm standing there in all
Yeah.
this stuff. But exactly, I'm laughing about it now.
Well, that's one thing I was showing you, yeah, the video. Anyway,
Anyway,
you can edit this out. You can edit
we'll
that
leave
out.
it in. Anyway, so it's good for people to know we're human. Anyway, I thank you all for listening to this program today. And if you would like a book that can give you a spiritual grounding in some of what we're talking about, I recommend my book, Seeds for the Season 91 Days of Breakthrough. That's Seeds for the Season 91 Days of Breakthrough, which is actually going to be a 4-volume set, working on season 2 soon. But anyway, look me up, Dr. Leanne B. Marino, on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold, and all of my titles will come up. There's over 35 in total. So feel free to go and check them out. We've got ebook and paperback available, and actually, we're going to have hardcover soon. So go ahead and check that out. Also, if you are interested in learning more about the world of counterculture Christianity, feel free to visit my website at kingdompowernow.org. That's kingdompowernow.org. And while we're mentioning Kingdom Power Now, that is my handle on social media. So let's have a conversation. Reach out and connect at Kingdom Power Now. I'm on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, WordPress, and anywhere else, Instagram, all bunch of them. Look me up at Kingdom Power Now and let's start that conversation. If you're interested in a seminary program that is entirely affordable, accessible, and you can do from home, and unlike many of those programs, you will actually use everything that you learn in seminary, check out Apostolic University Seminary at apostolicuniversity.org. That's apostolicuniversity.org. Also, if you are in the Charlotte, North Carolina area and you are interested in no favoritism, just family, because family means that nobody gets left behind, your found family is waiting for you at Sanctuary International Fellowship Tabernacle, better known as Sanctuary. Are welcome to check us out at welcomeinthisplace.org. That's welcomeinthisplace.org. And if you have a question or would like some information that is not available on our website or you're not able to find, feel free to reach out to us and we will be more than happy to get back to you. And this is Apostle Dr. Leanne Marino reminding you in closing that seasons change, but our connection to God is eternal. So, as we go through our seasonal changes, don't be afraid to bring eternity down to the practical level of something as simple as cleaning or giving away a book. Until next time, be blessed. Thank you. you for joining us on Kingdom Now. I pray it proves to be a blessing in your life. To learn more about this work, ask a question, submit feedback or a topic suggestion, advertise on air, or donate to this work, visit my website, which contains essential information and links for other points of contact around the web at kingdompowernow.org. Also, if you are in our area and would like to visit Sanctuary International Fellowship Tabernacle SIFT, visit welcomeinThisPlace.org. Until next time, this is Apostle Dr. Leanne Marino reminding you that the kingdom of God is within you, and that means the kingdom is now.